Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeateron, and today we are going to be doing another Dead by Daylight tier list. This is going to be on all of the killers and where I would rank them. S being the best, and D being that they have problems / issues / fundamentally flawed mechanics or something like that. So our first killer is Trapper, and Trapper is a pretty weak killer in my opinion. You can do well with him. It does depend on which map you get. It also depends on what items you're bringing. You do need add-ons with Trapper, at least the bags. Otherwise, you feel pretty weak just using the base power of Trapper, and he's probably the weakest killer without any sort of add-ons or anything. So it's kind of a pain to get your traps up. Your traps only work if somebody steps in them, so you have to be placing them where people are going to run to and aren't going to be easily able to disarm them. Trapper also has some major counters, like Dead Hard being able, you can just Dead Hard right through his trap. A lot of times if people know that there's a trap around there, it's just a smarter idea for them to take a hit from the Trapper and then run the other direction. If you stay to one side of the map where you know Trapper hasn't been, there's probably no traps over there. If you bring maps, you can find his traps. There's a lot of things that can counter Trapper. And also if survivors just start doing gens really fast at the start. Something like Corrupt Intervention can help with that. That's usually what I run. Of course, Ruin, Undying, a couple other slowdown perks can help you, but a lot of the time you're just going to be spending the first minute or so just setting up traps, grabbing traps, doing that, and then chasing people and hopefully corralling them into your traps. So Trapper is going to go into D tier. Up next we have Wraith, and Wraith has been improved since I started playing the game. He used to be pretty weak, now he's decent. I still wouldn't say he's super strong though. He's really good at finding somebody and getting the first hit on them, but once you've hit somebody once, the people are usually pretty cautious around if he's going to come back and uncloak and hit you, and if he's not doing that, then he's just chasing you regularly, in which case he has no power. So he's not as strong. I do like that he can move around the map really quick. He is a killer that I would definitely recommend to new players, not only because he's free, but also because it's very easy for you to find survivors, and survivors are unlikely to be able to hide from you very easily. So Wraith is much better. His add-ons are pretty decent, and I would probably put Wraith into C tier now. He is better than he was, but he still has some issues. Maybe I could see myself moving him up to B tier. He's B or C tier for me. Up next we have Huntress. Huntress can be really strong. Huntress has her hatchets, which once you get used to them, you could use them pretty effectively on most maps. She's not good on indoor maps at all. It's very easy to tell where she is, and she likely won't be able to hit you with the hatchets. That's just a problem that she has, and a problem a lot of killers have. A lot of killers aren't way great in indoor maps. You can throw hatchets from one side of the map to the other, potentially, and rain hatchets down on top of somebody, which is really awesome when it does work, but it's more of a trick shot that you're going to do every once in a while, not really a reliable thing that you're going to be able to hit constantly with the Huntress. But Huntress is pretty strong overall. I'd probably put her up into A tier. She is a ranged killer, so she does move slower than the other killers do, at least that we've talked about so far. And her humming radius does give her away, at least as to where she is. It also isn't a good idea to run things like terror radius affecting perks, like Monitor and Abuse on Huntress is pretty much useless. But you can run a lot of very weird perks on Huntress because she works with so many different things, like running Iron Maiden on her can be fun. Bitter Murmur can be really good on her too, so she's pretty strong overall, I'd say. Up next, we have Bubba, the Cannibal Leatherface. Probably one of the killers that I play the most, and he's pretty fun. He's got his chainsaw that he can insta-down people with. He can insta-down multiple people with. Bubba is known as the best camper in the game, and he still probably is at that. So that's rather annoying if you're playing against him and he is playing that way, because if he just wants to sit and face camp, there's literally nothing you can do about that. Somebody's going to die, and in which case it's just kind of a pain. But Bubba is really good at downing people. You can go through pallets pretty fast. You can down people pretty quick. The only real problem Bubba has is his limited mobility. Everywhere he wants to go, he has to run to. But once he does run there, you can run through pallets very fast with him. I mean, if you just rev up your chainsaw, people are generally going to drop the pallets if they know what's good for them, especially if you play well as Bubba, because if they don't and they get greedy, it's very easy to insta-down them with his chainsaw. So I would put Bubba probably up into A tier with Huntress. Personally, I'd put him a little bit above Huntress, but I'm not as familiar with Huntress as I am with Bubba. The Doctor is kind of an interesting killer. I don't play him a whole lot because I don't find him super fun, but he does have some interesting powers. namely his lightning, where you can see where people are. He's very oppressive towards new players, but against more experienced players, not so much. His lightning confuses a lot of new players, so that can be an advantage. It can also be a good killer to play once you're first getting into the game, because you can find people very easily with your static blast. Your electricity can also cause people to scream, so you can figure out where they are, and it denies windows, vaulting of pallets, things like that. So if somebody wants to camp a pallet, you can zap them with this and then just walk through and smack them. That's really strong, but any experienced player will know that and they'll drop the pallet immediately. And that's probably the best way to play against Doctor, is play super safe. Doctor also doesn't have a whole lot of map pressure, and if he gets madness up really high, then he can have some map pressure and some gen pressure through that, but it's not always the most consistent, especially on big maps. Doctor tends to struggle on large maps. Small maps he does pretty well on. I'd probably put Doctor in about B tier. I think he's a pretty average killer. He can do just about everything that any other killer can do, and he's not terrible at anything, but he's not great at anything either. So I figure B tier is probably a safe place to put him. Up next we got Freddy. Freddy can be really oppressive at times, especially for teams that aren't coordinated or aren't paying attention. Regular Freddy I find rather boring with the blood pools, but Dream Palette Freddy I do actually find quite fun. He does have map pressure with being able to teleport from gen to gen. He can also run that with something like Pop Goes the Weasel and then kick a gen with it. Information perks I find are really useful on Freddy, and the lack of a terror radius also really helps. Freddy is overall a pretty solid killer, I would say, in terms of getting kills and stuff, but with a well-coordinated team, you can still beat him. I don't know where I'd put Freddy. Freddy's either high B tier or low A tier for me. I think I'm going to put him high B tier. If a good team spreads out, it's still rather difficult to get to each of them. And he doesn't down people incredibly fast. He has to hit them twice, which can take a while. I mean, at loops, the usual way that you play Freddy at a loop is you put a blood pool on one side, put a blood pool on the other side, force somebody to run into the first blood pool, and then corral them back so they run into the second one, and you can hit them before they reach the pallet. So you can do that, but you still have to do that twice. And if it's a good team that's okay with being injured, that's okay with, especially if they got a lot of healing, then it can take you a while to kill him as Freddy. So I think high B tier is where I'd put him. The pig is probably one of my favorite killers. I enjoy playing her. Her dash is rather fun to use, even though it's not super consistent. And that's the big problem that pig has, is her consistency. You can sometimes have amazing games as Pig where you can put bear traps on everybody and it takes them forever to take them off, or bear traps just kill one or two people randomly. That can be really useful, but you can also have games where everybody gets a bear trap and everybody gets them off instantly and everybody's still full health and they're still working away at the gens. So her slowdown is kind of questionable at times, as well as her crouch and her charge aren't always the best, although they are really fun to do, and you can do some sneaky maneuvers with her. I would probably put Pig into C tier. I don't know if I'd probably put her on the same tier as Wraith. Clown is kind of like Freddy, but weaker. He has no teleporting, so he loses map pressure, where Freddy actually has that. He plays loops pretty much the same way that Freddy does, where you stand at one side of the loop, you throw a poison bottle at one side, so to slow somebody down, you throw a yellow bottle at your feet, you get powered up, you walk around, you smack them. That's about it. Assuming somebody stays there or if somebody leaves, you just chase them. Way to beat Clown is just you keep throwing down pallets. That's about it. As soon as you get to a pallet, you just toss it down and then just play around it. If you get hit, you go to the next one, you do the same thing. So Clown always has slow engagements. They're usually not all that quick unless you're running like the pinky finger Clown build, in which case, yeah, Clown is much better. He'd probably be moved up to like B or A tier then if you're running that specific add-on, but we're not going to be accounting for specific add-ons like that. Just him as a killer, he's still fairly weak, I would say. He's better than he once was, but I still think he's probably like high end of D tier or low end of C tier. He's better than Trapper because he can do a bit more than Trapper. He doesn't have to take as much time to set up or anything like that. He can just go and smack people. But the slowdown of the bottles, it's kind of like playing Huntress in a way. It's just you don't get rewarded for actually hitting people with your bottles, where you do with Huntress if you throw your axe and hit someone. Next we got Hag. Hag is really strong because most people don't play against Hag. I could easily see people putting Hag into S tier. I don't know if I will, but she can have a lot of map pressure. She can also camp really well, she does take time to set up, so you have to play her slow, and almost all of Hag games are really slow, which is why I don't really enjoy playing her all that much. The best way to play against her is just go out and harass her at the very start. Have somebody or 2 people on the team go out and harass her where the other 2 are doing gens, and then you slowly grind down gens as you just continually harass her so that she can't continually down people and camp them near gens and stuff like that. And against regular people, she probably is S tier. Against more coordinated teams that knows what she does, she's probably not that high. She's probably A or B tier. But since there isn't a whole lot of people like that, I would probably put Hag up into S tier. Up next, we got Billy, and Billy is one of my favorite killers. He is super fun to play. You have tons of map pressure. You can insta-down people. Even if you're not insta-downing people, you can end chases very fast just by faking your chainsaw and hitting them with the hammer. Or you can do chainsaws where they wouldn't think that you could do because of your curves. I'm still not way great at curving, but I have gotten better at just using Billy in general. And Billy is pretty strong. His one downside is that he doesn't really have many add-ons. Like, no add-ons really change the way that you play Billy. So you don't have anything fantastic going for you, but you already have a really strong base power. So I'd probably put Billy up into A tier. I don't know if I'd put him above Bubba, because Bubba is easier to play. Up next is Spirit, and Spirit's going right up to S tier. She has a really strong power. You just need to be able to listen for people, and if you play games like I do, something like Hunt Showdown or anything like that, it's very easy to figure out where people are just by the noises that they're making. And it used to be pretty strong if you took Strider with her. Strider's since been nerfed, and Iron Will has been buffed, which is probably good because it sort of counters her, kind of. She's probably the most annoying killer to play against as survivors because she does do really well, but she doesn't have... Well, she has very minimal effort in her part. Up next, we have Legion, and Legion has always felt kind of weak to me. Legion has kind of just issues all the way around because he can injure people very easily with his power, and you do have map pressure if you want to run across the map, but then you're getting rid of your power, so it can be kind of a trade-off if you want to do that, and it's not always the best. You can jump through windows and over pallets, which is kind of nice. But mostly you want to keep injuring people with them not being able to heal up very quickly. Most good survivors aren't going to even bother healing up. They're just going to play injured and be fine with that. And the problem with that with Legion is that you know when he's coming. He isn't like a stealth killer where you want to be healed up when you're injured, similar to Wraith, because you don't know when Wraith is actually going to come and hit you again. So you want to be always at full health so that you can take a hit and run away so you don't go down. With Legion, you don't have that. You always hear when he's coming. Or she's coming. Whenever they are coming towards you, you can start hearing the terrorists get louder and louder. You just run in the opposite direction and then just try to play around loops best you can until you go down. So Legion's not too hard to beat. He's actually probably one of, if not the weakest killer in the game right now. And I would probably put him into D tier. I don't know if I'd put him below Trapper. If you're just counting base kit, then Legion is stronger than base Trapper. But if you're counting add-ons, then Trapper is much stronger than Legion, I would say. So move these around however you would like. Up next we have Plague, and Plague can be really good. A lot of people don't play against Plague all that often, and a lot of people seem to not understand really how to play against her whenever I've played her. Either everybody tries to cleanse, but they do it in very convenient positions for me, so I can get my Corrupted Plague, or they don't try to cleanse at all, and you can just smack them regularly, and then it's not hard to just go for one person after another, especially if one person on the team keeps insisting on cleansing. That's probably the best situation. I find that Plague is pretty strong just because people don't play against her that often. Very similar to like Hag, but whenever you do play against a team that does know how to play against Plague, it's more of a difficult match because you don't have any map pressure. Your Corrupted Plague is honestly not as powerful as some people make it out to be. I would probably put Plague somewhere high up into B tier, similar to Freddy, where you're really strong against most survivors, but when you do play against strong survivors, it can be a bit difficult. Up next we have Nurse, and Nurse is, to nobody's surprise, going all the way up into S tier. Even though I'm not great as Nurse, I see the amount of potential that Nurse has. You can pretty much get through any map with Nurse without too much trouble, simply because you can ignore a lot of the problems that might show up on a map. You can ignore pellets, you can ignore walls, you can ignore pretty much any of Survivor's perks too, because you can down people so quickly as you just blink to them. Nurse is really strong, and some games when I've played her, I've felt incredibly powerful with her, where you just kill the whole team in a few minutes. And then other times I felt completely useless as Nurse, where I just couldn't hit anybody. That's more on my part, though, but if you are really, really good as Nurse, she is definitely the best killer in the game. Up next, we have Michael, and a lot of people say that Michael's the weakest killer in the game, and I don't think that he is. For some reason, people say it takes a long time to get out of Tier 1 with him, which I don't think I've ever had a game that's lasted more than like 30 seconds, able to get to Tier 2. And then I can usually get to Tier 3 fairly fast, too. That usually doesn't take more than a minute into the game. I don't know if people are just trying to play Michael as, like, how he appears in movies, where you just try to hide around corners and stalk people and stuff, but the way that you usually do it is you just walk right up next to somebody, stalk them till you're Tier 2, and then just continue and smack them, or wait till you get Tier 3 and insta-down them. Michael's also got a very small tear radius, which makes it really nice for you to play on indoor maps, and even in larger maps, he's not too bad unless it's a wide open map, in which case everybody can see Michael and they'll just likely be trying to hide from him. Even then, it shouldn't take you that long to get up to Tier 2, and you can still walk around and hit people just the same way that you normally would. He also vaults faster than other killers, which is kind of nice. You can get a few hits where you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So, also Bamboozle really works well with him too. I'd put Michael up into C tier. He's still not way great. He still has issues. If you just have people that are playing super safe, it can be really difficult to play as Michael, because people will just run to a pallet, drop it down, play as safe as they can until you break it, and then move on to the next pallet, and so on and so forth. Now, again, with certain add-ons, Michael is a lot stronger. If you take, like, the Tombstone piece, he's probably, like, A tier then, just because you kill somebody right away, and now it's a 3v1, far easier for you. But if you're not doing that, then probably low end of C tier. Alright, up next we have Ghostface, and Ghostface is another killer that can be really good. He's a lot of fun to play. Since he is a stealth killer, you can kind of creep around and use his power to hit people or just to surprise people. I really like doing that with him. But he's kind of suffers from somewhat similar mechanics as Michael, in that sometimes his mechanics just don't work. You can be stalking somebody and it doesn't count. They can be not even looking at you through a wall or something and reveal you. There's just a lot of problems that come with Ghostface. He is still pretty strong when his power works, but he's not always the most consistent killer. He doesn't have a whole lot of map pressure. He can stalk the whole team to like 99 and then down everybody, so he does have a lot of snowball, but I find him less consistent than Michael, even though I'd probably rank him higher than Michael. So I'd put Ghostface in C tier, maybe into B tier. He's another one of those killers that could go either way for me. Next we have Demo, and Demo is pretty much considered the most balanced killer in the game. He does well at everything. He's got his lunge, which is pretty basic, and you can also shred pallets with it, as well as it can be on a lower cooldown than just your basic attack if you're running something like Barb's Glasses. You can also use his leap just to make distance on top of hills and off of buildings and stuff. His portals can also be really useful for getting from one side of the map to the other. He's just overall a pretty average killer at everything, which is kind of nice at times. I'd put Demo probably in the middle of B tier. Up next we have Oni, which plays similar to Billy, but can play way more aggressive, especially if you can down multiple people when your power is up. You also have tons of map pressure and higher mobility than somebody like Billy does once you have your power. You just have to take the time to get your power, which can be a little bit difficult at times. If people are playing super safe, just not letting you hit them, dropping all the pallets and just running to the next pallet and whatnot, that can be really annoying as Oni, just because you don't get to use your power then. And at that point, you're just walking around as a normal killer. But once you do have your power, and if you're good with Oni, he is probably high up into A tier. He is very strong, but does have potentially a very slow early game. Up next, we have Deathslinger. Deathslinger is another pretty strong killer. You can end loops very quickly with him. If you play FPS games like I do, he's pretty easy to pick up and use. He's unfortunately not very fun to play against, though. He can be fun to play, but not fun to play against. And he can be really annoying. He also has a very small tear radius, so on indoor maps he can be a pain. He can also be a pain in larger maps that just don't have a whole lot of lines of sight, so he can get up close to you and smack you. He's also really good at any sort of window, just because he can hit you through the animation and then smack you on the other side of the window. So I'd probably put Deathslinger up into A tier. He probably alongside Huntress. They both feel pretty strong to me. Next we got Pinhead, the Executioner. He is another really strong killer, in my opinion. Once you get used to playing him, his line can be a bit tricky to get used to and to kind of bait it towards people. Pinhead is also really good because you can ignore a lot of the best perks in the game. You can completely ignore something like Unbreakable or Soul Guard or really any perk that allows you to use stuff on the ground, Decisive Strike, anything like that. As long as you're tormented, Pyramid Head pretty much has a solution for it. So I'd probably put Pyramid Head up into A tier as well. Yeah, I guess right there, just underneath Oni. Up next, we got the Twins, and the Twins can be really strong. Unfortunately, the Twins are usually fairly boring to play as, unless you're only playing as Victor. But that's usually not the best way to play Twins. The best way to play Twins is to proximity camp people. Send Victor out to go harass somebody, or lock somebody in a locker or something like that. Down somebody, potentially. And then switch over to Charlotte so that you can run over and smack people, or so that you can defend hooks and stuff like that. So it's not always the most fun to play them, but they are quite strong, and they do work well pretty much on every map. So I'd probably put the Twins somewhere into A tier as well. Blight is super fun to play. He is probably one of the funnest killers to play. He's also probably one of the strongest killers to play, assuming you don't slide off every single wall that you run into, because unfortunately the collision in the game is kind of wonky at times, and it can be difficult for you to bounce where you want to bounce to run around as Blight. But you have tons of mobility, you can down people very fast. It's not very uncommon at all just to chase somebody around a loop, smack them once with this, use your power, and then run right over and down them, or do the opposite of that, use your power, smack somebody, and then just walk around and down them normally. So you can down people fairly quick, and I'd probably put Blight up into S tier as well, because he is quite strong. Next we have Trickster, and Trickster has recently got buffed quite a bit, which is better because he was one of the weaker killers, but now he's pretty strong. He's rather annoying to play against now, but nonetheless he is fairly decent. He still doesn't have any map pressure, and he still moves slower than other killers. Not that that usually matters in wide open maps. It might add up eventually throughout a match, but most of the time he'll get around the map the same way. But you can down people at low loops. At high wall loops you can't as much. That can be a bit annoying, but he is stronger than he was. I would probably put Trickster into B tier. And then our last killer as of right now, because actually today the new PTB dropped and Pinhead's out. So up to right now we have Nemesis. And Nemesis plays a lot like Pyramid. You can do very similar things around loops. You can also break pallets potentially quicker, at least if you get your tentacle arm up to tier 2. Your zombies can be really annoying depending on the map, especially on small maps. On large maps, they don't really matter all that much. And if you're playing against a good team, you don't have the most map pressure. You just kind of have to run everywhere. He seems like a super fun killer. I haven't actually played as him, but I have seen him play quite a bit. And I'd probably put him into either high C tier or low B tier. I think I'd put him into low B tier, maybe above Trickster, below Doctor. Maybe I'd put Doctor lower than these guys. These guys seem to be a little bit better at downing people. So I think that's where I'd put him. This is probably where I'd put all of the killers in Dead by Daylight, at least as of right now. Tell me what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And tell me if you'd like to see more tier lists like this. I would love to do killers based on how fun they are to play and how fun they are to play against, as well as like all their add-ons and stuff like that. So thanks for watching this video. If you're new here, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post these videos. Special thanks to all the supporters of the channel. These are my members on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. If you would like to be a part of that, there are links down in the description below. And if you'd like to see my other Dead by Daylight content, be sure to click over here on this list right now. That'll take you to a full playlist full of them. Thanks again, and I will talk to you guys next time. Till then, stay cool, and bye!